Welcome to the Wareham Conservation Commission meeting of Wednesday, December 4th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Fair to ask you because
members present.
Everybody, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Everybody's here, including Agent Dave Pichette. Good enough? Good enough?
Big list.
Now, before we start the agenda, I have a question to ask everybody. Who will be here for the December 18th meeting?
Me.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Yeah. As far as I know.
Yeah, I'm back by
So I'll get a quorum? Mary? Good chance, okay. So we will have a December 18th will be the next meeting. Okay.
You're gonna mention the joke first while you're on the topic?
Oh, well, I'm on the topic. There'll be no meeting on January 1st.
Oh,
I just thought it just... So our next meeting after that will be January 15th.
And I was gonna make cookies.
You were going to make cookies. Thank you. We have 2 sets of minutes that have been presented to us. One for March 6, 2019. Any comments on them?
I don't know if it's because I was dilated eyes, but it just seemed that the one, not the 2nd of October, the other one had all sorts of confusing things at the end of it.
Oh,
Could be my eyes, though.
all right, so that, I've read the March 6th, and I have no comments. Does anybody else?
No.
No,
Can I
not
take a
on my
motion
side.
to approve?
So moved.
I heard it, a second?
Second.
I heard a second. March 6th minutes are approved. The next set of minutes we have is October 2nd. I did ask everybody to pay attention to it because it was a fairly long, lengthy meeting.
Never looked all right.
I'll need a motion to approve the minutes of October 2nd, 2019.
Second.
I need a motion. I have a motion. Now I'll take your second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, both minutes have been approved, and I will sign them.
Minutes, and I couldn't.
We have continued hearings, Mark and
Juanita.
Juanita Holland, and are
Holland.
they here? Holland? I'm trying, Mr. White, I'm sorry. Are the Hollands here? I'm not seeing them.
Bring it back up.
I'll bring
later.
it back up. The Buzzards Bay Coalition has asked for a continuation until 12/18. Is there anybody here for the floats off of Wickets Island? I'm seeing none. I need a motion to continue until the 18th. I heard a motion.
Second.
I have a second. It's continued until the 18th
Those
of,
weren't off Wickets Island, by the way. It
well,
was
they're between Wickets and the Deacon's property.
Deacon's property.
Deacon's property. The next one is the Homestead Realty Trust. Is there anybody here for that hearing? Please come forward. Thank you. Mr. Burchett will read to the project.
Thank you. We can share it. Oh,
We only need one. Thank you.
So we have new plans.
Let's see what these look like.
Oh, this is the clearing.
Good evening, Sam Iamelli with JC Engineering.
The name again?
Sam Iamelli.
Sam? Okay.
All right.
Give Mr. Bichette a chance to read the amended plans, and we'll be right there, okay?
Sure.
So this is this last time?
I was trying to figure that out. You see so many of them.
That's true. Parts of town I don't even know.
Yeah, looks familiar. Yeah, we did.
All set?
All set.
Okay, this project site is at 10 Jordan Road, and this application was filed in response to an enforcement order that was issued for unpermitted clearing work and alteration of land within the buffer zone to wetlands at this site. The project involves remediation work to address the violations and also proposes some additional work, which includes the construction of a basketball court, a dog kennel area, stormwater structure, and some fencing. And this is within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands at the property. At the last meeting, we had continued the hearing because I had some questions about the plan in terms of the area to be replanted was only shown within the 30-foot zone from the wetland when it should have been within the 50-foot out from the wetland. So I do see that is reflected on the revised plan that was just handed out. Another issue I had brought up was the installation of fencing on the side of the property that goes basically right down to the edge of the pond. So this is within the 50-foot no activity zone, and I had recommended that that be removed. So that is still showing up on the plan, so I would still recommend against that. The other work is all outside the 50-foot no activity zone and can be permitted. They are showing hay bales and silt fence between the work and the resource area. And this application also includes work to restore some alterations that were made off the particular lot along the edge of the pond, which involved placement of sand within the pond area. So that is to be removed. That's approximately 1,500 square feet or so that would have to be removed from that area. And there's also some regrading work to restore an area where material was excavated out of within the buffer zone. So again, at this stage, the main issue that I have left is just the question of the fencing. We do have a DEP file number for this project. So at this point, it's up for discussion by the commission.
Sam, any comments on that?
As for the fence, my client is pushing to put that up because he's having neighbors walking down these pre-existing paths on the back of his property, and he would like to stop that. So he's proposing these chain link fences down to the wetland. They would be put in all hand dug, no machinery, 2-foot holes every 8 feet to provide footings for the posts. And like Dave said, we expanded the restoration area up to 50 feet and provided hay bales for all other work.
So they need the fence to go all the way down to the water?
Correct. These paths are on the back of the property down below the 50-foot buffer zone.
Can you just point to them? Do you have one to go up?
Sure. This opening here within the tree line.
Yeah, right here. Yep. Here's a question for you. Sure. Everything I'm seeing on this particular plan is owned by your client, correct?
Within the boundaries of,
Just this? Oh, so why did he put the sand on not his property?
That's a good question.
So he does not own this piece of land in which he dumped sand in the pond. That's not his, but that's where he put the sand, and that has to be
Correct.
removed.
and
Okay.
that's going to be removed, correct? Yep.
So because of the dirt path that already existed, he wants a fence going from the water all the way up to just behind his house,
Correct.
as opposed to just over the path.
Yes.
Okay.
Is this the line?
All right, questions on the board?
Is there a planting scheme? Do they know what to plant? And if so, could the trail be planted and thus eliminating the fence?
We do have an approved list of shrubs off to the side, and we're just calling for various plantings throughout. That is something we could take into consideration.
Unfortunately, the path is within the 30-foot no-work zone. So that adds another complication with what
Was there
can be done there.
planting going on there anyway?
No,
Okay.
Well, there is planting within that area, yes. This
But
whole
to be
zone,
restored,
this whole zone is within the area to be replanted.
and that's within 30 feet, because they cleared everything out.
Right, so that's all gonna be planted right across.
But nothing substantial that would, by planting on the pathway to prevent continued traffic on the path. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I
That
believe
maybe something can be planted
know,
there to,
poison ivy is native.
because how many paths is he trying to prevent
Yeah,
people from walking on? I see one,
It's mainly, yes, that
two,
one.
right?
Mainly that one to the bottom, yep.
The one on the,
Right.
close to the water.
Correct, yep.
Can you just point to that?
That is
Oh, I mean, I'll go over.
the bottom of the shaded area.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the dirt path they want to prevent people from walking on.
The red.
This is the path.
See this dirt
Yeah,
path? That's what they
okay,
want to
alright.
prevent, and so there's the fence.
No,
Oh, it's not this fence
is
on the top?
here,
Here's the
And
fence.
there's,
But they want to prevent people from using that path.
This is where he wants the fence.
It's not this
but
fence
that takes it all the way down to,
No, it's
this is not his
Oh,
land.
that's not his
right?
land.
Oh, that's not,
Building a fence.
Dirt path, right?
Doesn't make sense.
Does that help you?
Yes, thank you.
I just saw it now.
Okay,
wait a minute now. I'm confused.
anything else, Rob?
Where's the edge of his property?
Can I
Jim,
No, my only concern
you want to
is
comment?
no fence.
No fence. Your comment?
I'll wait till everybody.
Right here?
Okay,
I have a couple of questions.
wait a second.
You want me to wait, or?
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead, Alyssa.
All right. One, your pool, this is going to stay there, that above-ground pool?
Correct, yep.
That's filled,
This
and
is the property line?
where do they put the water when they take it out? When they take the water out of the pool, do they drain it into the pond?
That's something I would have to talk to my client with,
I would say they better not,
right?
yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so that's one thing that I have a question on. You have 2 storage containers that are going to be relocated. Where are they going to be relocated?
Off-site.
Off-site.
It's this fence here.
Okay, so now I have another question, and that is,
Folks,
all right, so how many dogs, because we've had some other people come up with wanting kennels. How many dogs are going to be in this kennel?
I don't have an exact number.
I would like to know, because isn't there something about the numbers? I mean, we
Not
had
us,
that with the other
not
kennel.
conservation.
No,
It's pretty good size,
um,
still.
well, because the number makes a difference also with what does he do with their waste and excrement. That's certainly conservation. I mean, we had the other side, they had their own system to take care of.
They were a kennel.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a kennel. I'd like to know how many dogs, because is this a private business of breeding
Are you
or
hearing her
whatever?
question? Can you answer that?
I'm sorry, can you say
Are
that?
they
again?
breeding, are they going to be breeding dogs?
No breeding, no.
So this is not a business. He's just trying to confine his dog or
Correct.
dogs.
Correct, yep.
I would like to know how many dogs.
Okay, I can get
think
that number
that's
for you.
Important. All right,
Who owns the land the sand was put on?
I'm sorry?
Who owns the land the sand was?
That
put
is
on?
open space owned by John Churchill and Nazi El Kawasi.
And you have permission to remove it now?
Yes.
Okay, Mary, any questions?
Is this pathway, is this being used by neighbors or just,
Yes, correct. Neighbors further down the road at the southern end of the pond.
so, you know,
has it always been used by them? It's been an open path?
It seems to be that way, yeah. You can see by the aerial images I have, those are prior to the development of these roads, where you can see the outline of the path.
so how are these people going to get to the pond?
So do they have another way of getting to the pond? Is that where they were going to when they're walking across that area?
I'm sure they can access directly behind their houses, but they seem to be continuing to use these paths.
They can maybe not behind from their own houses. I mean, because why else would they use, if they could easily get there from their own house, why would they use that path? I doubt that they can get there
I
from
don't
their own
think that's
houses.
anything Sam can answer or the client can answer. You'd have to ask the people who's walking it why they're,
Well, I think the client could know. I mean, he knows how it's used and by whom, and what's around him. Not gonna go there
anything
now.
else, Mary? Okay,
I do have a question about the fence.
Yes,
There is an existing fence apparently at the top of the property, right?
correct.
And that does go well within the, looks like 30-foot no activity zones. Has that fence been there a while? Do you know, Dave?
Where is it that you're looking at?
this one,
It's marked on here. Is that a new fence, or is that gonna be?
I
This
think that's proposed.
At the top, I'm sorry, that's proposed as well.
That's proposed as well?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Exactly.
okay, I got you. Yep, it is. Oh, it says there, okay, I got you, I see, yep, I missed that, yep, all right.
okay, anything else? Ken? No? Yep, Mr. Bichette had like to,
Yeah, just to refocus on that particular issue, one of the reasons why that should not be included is, again, one of the reasons for the 50-foot no activity zone and protecting that is to have some area for wildlife to be able to traverse back and through there. And so if it gets fenced off and chopped up, then that's going to eliminate that from being able to continue to happen along the edge of the wetlands, which is what you're trying to protect. So I just wanted to make that point understood.
but this area that's grayed in there, which includes the dirt path, is subject to a restoration.
That's right.
So we could put some type of lower plant around that path and prevent walking on the path, and to put a whole bunch of blueberry bushes or something along that way,
Correct.
to do the same thing to keep people from walking there, right?
Maybe.
Use poison ivy.
Well, I was, and signs saying private property, no
Yeah.
trespassing.
Right.
Yeah, people will read signs.
Yeah, but this.
So what would the board like to do? We come back and ask for a new plan?
Well, I believe there's some questions that need answering anyway.
The questions would be number of dogs?
That's the chief.
Yes?
Oh,
Oh, well,
okay.
please come
Well, that-
forward and identify yourself.
I'm George. George Al-Khazin, I'm the owner. Sorry, I thought. I can answer any question you want.
Okay, the one question came up is that how many dogs do you have in your
At
dog
the
kennel?
house, I have 2 dogs. I have 4, but two of them move into different location.
So you're not gonna breed there, it's not gonna be a business or anything
No,
like
no,
that?
no, no,
Just
no.
You just want to confine your dogs when they're
Just give
outside?
them their space. You
Does
know,
that
they're
answer
not
your-
put them in a kennel, they're always on a chain.
Yeah,
We have all that land. But the point I'm regarding the fence, my backyard become a park to people. People coming and walking with their dogs into my yard. It's not as about their wildlife. I'm putting that fence there because my land goes all the way to the water. And people walking there is like a park. I made it like a park, like I'm putting chairs, outside. People think it's just they walking. I put sign, private property, all this, beware of the dog, doesn't matter. They walk with their dogs inside my property. I have dogs in my property. That's the whole thing here. I don't wanna, people from the other side coming from the beach walking in to my property and walking down both ways, coming inside my property. And then I have dogs there, and they have dogs, and it's your property. I'm not hurting anything.
Dogs.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think it's, an unfortunate problem, but we do have a bylaw, and the commission is supposed to adhere to that. So, you happen to have property near wetlands, and therefore it's subject to the bylaws that we have.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I'm from Canada. I've been here for 5 years, so I don't understand much what's going on. So I'm
are you
trying.
the sole owner of this house?
Pardon?
Are you the sole owner
Yeah,
of this
I'm the
house?
owner, yes.
But you know Nazi.
Yes, my cousin Nazi.
He knows.
This is the problem. I don't communicate with
There
Nazi
isn't
much.
anything that Nazi doesn't know about our
I'm
bylaws.
sorry, but I don't communicate much with Nazi.
Okay? I mean, it's just, there has to be some other method to be used to prevent the tourist coming on, the walking on your property. I would love to be able to find some way to put some natural barrier as opposed to a hard wire fence.
I can put wood if you want up to the foot, 50 foot, and then continue with wire. That will never touch anything has to do with the nature. I keep wood.
How about a placement of boulders along this line as
won't keep
opposed to a
people out.
fence?
Won't keep people
Yeah,
out.
but at least the idea is that here is a hard, fast property line identified with boulders, not to prevent them from walking there, but it gives them a hint that it's not open to public transit anymore.
Why don't we could take the time for myself and the owner and the engineer to discuss some options, so that way we could come up with something that works and still meets the
Exactly.
bylaw.
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So is there anybody here for this particular project?
Sandy, one more. I have
Sorry,
one more.
yep.
I have one more question. That is, you have an above-ground pool?
Not yet. Yeah, that's
You're
it.
hoping to, so that will be, that will be filled by a tanker truck, and then you'll take the water out via tanker truck or something like that?
What
You
the
won't
pool
let,
existing there right now?
Right.
This empty. It's gone.
okay,
It's gone from there.
but when you put a pool, if you put a pool in there, then you can't let the water go into the pond.
to the pond,
You know,
okay,
you
no, no,
can't,
no.
and you have to have water come in and,
Okay, it's okay,
be
take it
put
out.
in, yeah.
Exactly. No problem.
So we'll add draining of the pool to the conditions. Okay, so you know to here, we continue, you think you can have your discussions by the 18th?
I think so.
I take them, anybody else? So I'd like to take a motion to continue until the 18th.
So moved.
second.
I have a motion, I heard a second, all in favor? Aye. So that Mr. Bichette will speak with several parties regarding alternatives to the fence, okay?
Thank you.
It is after our hearing, so,
Notice of public hearings? You ready, Sandy?
yes, please.
Pursuant to the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetland Protective Bylaw, Division 6. Public hearing will be held in Room 320, Wareham Multi-Service Center, 49 Marion Road, Wareham, Massachusetts, on Wednesday, December 4th, 2019, at 7:15 p.m. on the request for determination of applicability for Repurposed Properties LLC, care of J.C. Engineering, Inc., 2854 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, Mass. 02538, to demolish an existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling, driveway, associated utilities, grading, located on Assessors Map 45, lots F60.A and F60.B, 11 Indian Neck Road, Wareham, Mass.
Thank you. Anybody here for this project? Please come forward. Oh, and identify yourself again, Sam. Mr. Bichette will read to the particular project. Sam. Okay, say it again.
For the record, Sam Iamelli with JC Engineering.
Thank you.
The project site is 11 Indian Neck Road, and the project involves demolishing an existing home and constructing a new home on the same site within a coastal flood zone. There's an existing 22 by 30-foot house which is to be removed, and then a new 30 by 42-foot house with attached 22 by 24-foot garage is proposed at the site. There is some grading to be done around the backyard of the property. They also are proposing a underground structure to handle runoff from the proposed structure, This project is not in the buffer zone to any other resource areas, so I would recommend the approval of the project with a negative determination number 2.
Sam, anything to add?
I don't believe so.
Questions on the board?
No?
No?
Just, yeah, that house is in bad shape. Just out of question, have you been before Historic Commission to remove this house?
We've not.
Okay, you plan to. I believe they have control of any house in excess of 75 years old. I think that house is a little older than that. Okay, just crossing my Ts and putting my nose where I don't belong, but just as a side note, my aunt lived across the street on top of the hill, so I grew up with that house in there in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Done. So anybody here from the audience wants to speak for or against this project? I'm seeing none. I take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to close?
Motion to close, thank you.
Second.
I heard a second. The hearing is closed. And how about, I
Motion
need a
to-
vote. I
Motion
need a
to
vote to
approve,
close. I
Negative
need a
3.
vote to
Oh.
close. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, thank you. We're closed. Okay,
Motion to approve with -2 and standard.
just negative.
Negative 2
Yep.
and
Yep.
negative 3.
Negative 2.
2.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? It's done. Before you do anything, see Mr. Pichette and the Historic Commission.
All right, thank you.
Notice of public hearings. Pursuant to the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetland Protective Bylaw, Division 6. Public hearing will be held in Room 320 in Wareham Multi-Service Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. On Wednesday, December 4th, 2019, at 7:15 p.m. on the notice of intent for CS Design Group, Inc., care of J.C. Engineering, Inc., 2854 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, Mass., to construct an addition and deck located on Assessors Map 3, Lot 253B, 29 Prospect Street, Onset, Mass.
Thank you. Is there anybody here to speak for this project? They've asked for a continuation. Is there anybody in the audience that was interested to speak for or against this project? They've asked for a continuation until the 18th.
So move.
I have that motion. I heard a second. It's continued until the 18th.
Notice of public hearing pursuant to the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetland Protective Bylaw Division 6. A public hearing will be held in Room 320, Wareham Multi-Service Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. On Wednesday, December 4th, 2019, at 7:15 p.m. on the notice of intent tastic of Thomas J. Parito, care of GAF Engineering, Inc., 266 Main Street, Wareham, Mass. 02571,
Okay, thank you.
All right.
to construct
Okay.
an aluminum pier, gangway, and float on Assessors Mass 20, Lot 1018, 15 over Jordan Road, Wareham, Mass.
Madam Chairman, for the record, Bob Rogers with GAF Engineering, representing TJP Realty.
Okay, we're talking about 15 or 015, right?
15.
Okay. You got to greet them. That will read to this.
The project site is at 15 over Jordan Road, and the project involves the construction of a pier, ramp, and float out into Shell Point Bay. A 200-foot pier, ramp, and float system is proposed in land under the ocean, salt marsh, and within a coastal flood zone. The site is also within the estimated habitat of rare and endangered species. The proposed pier would have to span approximately 70 feet of salt marsh. This also is a very shallow area at low tide. So I did have a question about the water depth at low tide between the bottom of the float and the bottom of the the land under the ocean. This should be indicated on the profile plan. I don't know if that's been shown on this plan that you submitted, or is that just, or did you just give us a scaled-down version of the original?
Well, the original one had it, and so does this one. You know, one of the revisions was to put a float stop so that we would be a minimum of 30 inches. But you can see mean low water is minus 205 at the float. And then if you look at the plan view, we're out at almost minus 5. So we've got about 2.5 feet as it is, but we added the notation for the float stop in response to the Division of Marine Fisheries comment. So it's not easily seen in the profile, but...
Well, what's not seen and why it needs to be in the profile is because you don't know what draft the float's gonna have. You're showing the contours, which is great, but without
Sure.
knowing what that draws, you don't know what the actual distance between the bottom of the float and the bottom is.
Well, sure, I mean, the draft is going to depend on how much weight is on it, but we're assuming a 6-inch draft.
Well, that's gonna need to be, you know, clarified. That's why I talked to Bill and asked that that be shown on the profile, so it was
Sure.
clear
Well,
as to what would be on, what it would be specifically.
right. Yeah, I spoke with Bill as well.
Okay.
But, you know, we do now, before, the previous plans called for a 24-inch minimum separation, so we're calling for 30-inch minimum separation. So it would just be an adjustment on the float stops.
Okay, let's see, what else? So there's 36-foot spans between the pile sets, and it's proposed to have 15 12-inch pilings that would need to be installed to support the structure. So I had a question about the methodology that's gonna be used to install these pilings. Is a floating barge gonna be used? I would assume for the water end, and how are the ones on the interior gonna be done that would be on the land and in the marsh? Also, we did not really get any formal information on whether or not eelgrass is present. We should have some sort of a report submitted about that. Also, some information on the types of boats that would utilize this structure. We did get comments from the harbor master, who suggested that a shellfish survey be done, as this area is used by recreational and commercial fishermen, as well as the area is used as a shellfish propagation area. We got comments from Mass Division of Marine Fisheries. They had some concerns for salt marsh impacts and also for the shallow water depths at the float end, and also about the construction methodology. We did get comments also from Mass Natural Heritage, and they had no negative comments. We did get a DEP file number for the project, but at this time, I would recommend a continuance for the plan clarifications and for the shellfish survey to be done, and also for some formal write-up on what the findings were relative to the eelgrass.
Would you like to add?
So, well, sure, just briefly. So we have no objection to a continuance tonight, but we did also raise the beginning of this pier in response to Division of Marine Fisheries, so that we would have at least 6 feet of separation from the bottom of the aluminum stringers to the marsh. So that was something that we did. Our surveyors, when they did the soundings on May 30th, and then again a couple of weeks ago, went out, and so we did do a survey for eelgrass. So we would certainly document that, as well as the fact that this particular applicant does not own a boat, and so he's proposing to use this for personal watercraft, kayaks, and jet skis. You know, I think we're aware that this is an area that certainly is expected to contain shellfish, and therefore the need to have at least 30 inches of separation from the floats to the bottom. And I don't know, I guess I would coordinate with David as to and Mr. Buckminster as to the extent of of a shellfish study. So I think we would put this, put a package together to respond to each of these issues.
There was a note from Mr. Buckminster that he didn't want this particular float, this pier, any longer than what was originally permitted. Is it? Do you know what was originally permitted
Well,
at this site?
yes, yeah, so, and I should have, so this pier, as well as the next one, was permitted for reconstruction in 1995. So I don't know how earlier the initial pier was constructed, but it was re-permitted right through Chapter 91 in 1995. We're trying to just get out to where we have a bit more water, is all it is. But you can see particularly on sheet 2, the dashed lines indicate.
I see it now, thank you.
So it shows the limits, and then, really the extension is what put us into jurisdiction with natural heritage endangered species, but they responded by letter that they have no issue with the extension of the pier. So,
I'm just gonna ask, why does he need 2 piers? Sorry, that's just my question, because you're gonna
Yeah.
come up with 0, and I'm, 0. I'm gonna
well,
say, why
it's,
2?
back in 95, there were three piers, the boat ramp, the seawall, all owned by Mr. Volpe. And so, again, just for the property value and the amenity, they're separate lots. So the lots and each pier could be, sold in the future.
Okay. All right, questions on the board, I'll start with you.
Not at this point.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I have a question. When we went out and looked at this site, the existing pier is not very long right now, maybe 20 feet or something that I could see.
Well, it's not even there, actually.
I mean, there was
It's
like a
just
few
remains on the.
Yeah. So you're gonna really reconstruct it, you're building a new pier, basically, right? I mean,
That's correct.
right? I
Right in
mean,
the same location as the original one,
Right.
which was destroyed prior to 95 and then re-permitted in
Gotcha.
95.
okay. All right, thanks.
Mary?
No questions this
Melissa?
time.
So going back to David's question, you have these piers that are in the water now. You're going to be taking those out, I take it, when you redo your,
Well, this one is all wooden piers, so I don't believe there's anything in there. The next one is the concrete
no,
piers.
the wooden piers, you'll be removing those, correct? Or not?
Anything that's existing now would be removed and replaced with new.
And they'll be removed by a barge offshore or something?
If they're in the water, again, we would do as much as we could from the land and then what we have to from the
They
water.
haven't, but I would think they might want to as part of the road dredging. There's enough of a flow.
Because I think we are looking for the installation equipment
Seems
on
to
land,
take
on
the
marsh
sand
and
out.
water. So we'll be looking for some type of clarification as to what machinery we use to do the construction on the 3 types of land we're talking about, right?
Yes.
On the water, on the marsh, and on the land. So that's up for question. Was there any other question the 2 of you had?
I was kind of curious how this relates to what, the new water, the new bathhouse and everything and all the boats they're gonna have and their usage. Are they gonna conflict at all, do you think?
No.
Well, this is just going to be a private pier for
Right,
whoever.
but if it's not, there's lots of boats in the harbor that, in the summertime.
It's a great
Is there
spot.
anybody here that came to discuss this 15 over Jordan dock? I'm seeing no one. Can I get a motion to continue? Will you be comfortable with the 18th, or you want later?
It might,
15th, the one after that.
yeah, I'd take the 18th for now, and then if we see that's not going to happen, I would send an email and
Okay.
request a continuance.
So moved.
I have a motion to continue until the 18th.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it's continued until the 18th. Better? Well, he's telling me the mic was not on, that's why it wasn't working.
So Sandy, do we want to go through the next one? It's the same sort of thing, except that the piers
Yeah,
are
just
concrete.
refer to the address
To
and the...
reconstruct a concrete
Yep.
pile, supported aluminum pier and gangway and float located on, I hope I'm doing the right one, map 120, lot 1027, 0 over Jordan Road off
Yes,
Wareham, Mass.
thank you. I gather this now has stops on it?
That's correct, yes. They're all the same issues, except
Yep.
Thank you.
this one has the existing concrete piles in the water that we would be
Yeah.
attaching to.
Yep. And so formally identify yourself for the record, so Kelly has it.
Yes, Madam Chair, and for the record, my name is Bob Rogers with GAF Engineering,
Thank you,
representing
Mr.
TJP Realty.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchett. We'll read the project. Can you just say ditto?
Yeah, pretty much. Just other than, like we already heard, the address is listed as 0 over Jordan Road. This pier is 196 feet and is going to utilize, or propose to utilize, the existing concrete supports that are already out in the water. The only difference on this proposal is they are proposing to encapsulate those existing concrete supports with another layer of concrete to firm those up and also to make them slightly higher than what they currently are. Other than that, all the same issues exist as we discussed on the last pier, and so my recommendation is more or less the same in terms of the reasons for continuance. And we do have a DEP file number for this as well.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I'd answer any questions, that's all.
So we're looking for shellfish,
Shellfish type of
Field
boats,
inventory,
construction methodology.
Right.
These
And eelgrass.
deteriorated stairs that are going to be removed, they're deteriorated concrete stairs and landing to be removed?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and are you going to be putting something back there?
Well, it would just be the new ramp.
You're not going to be putting new stairs in and a landing?
No, we're not. No, because the pier is going to be high up, enough up that people could just walk underneath it.
Yeah.
So we just have to get rid of the deteriorated existing stairs and put our new ramp.
well, weren't the stairs removed when we authorized the seawall?
Well, you authorized it, but the work hasn't begun.
No,
so-
but
Wasn't
the removal of the stairs part of that plan?
Yes, it was. There's, and we did, the same thing. We showed the riprap revetment, and we, because Division of Marine Fisheries was a little confused, they hadn't seen that NOI, because
Okay.
that revetment is landward of mean high water, so, so those two items may have been also in that notice, and certainly the revetment was.
Is there any other questions on the board? We'll wait for the rest of the information to come in. Anybody in the audience here for 0 over Jordan Road? I'm seeing none. Are you good with the continuation until the 18th?
Yes, Madam Chair.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. We're continued until all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, thank you. We're continued until 12:18.
Notice of public hearing
Thank
pursuant to the provisions, of Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetland Protected Bylaw, Division 6. A public hearing will be held in Room 320, Wareham Multi-Service Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. On Wednesday, December 4th, 2019, at 7:15 p.m. On the notice of intent for Neil Sullivan, care of GAF Engineering, Inc., 266 Main Street, Wareham, Mass. 02571, to raise an existing garage and construct a new garage located on Assessors Map 3, Lot 1037, Groveland Street, Wareham, Mass.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for the record.
Brian Grady with GAF Engineering, here for Mr. Sullivan.
Are we share?
Oh, you shared? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Pichette will read.
Go ahead. You can-
The project site is at 7 Groveland Street in Onset. And the project involves the removal of an existing garage and the reconstruction of a new garage. And this is partially on a coastal bank and within the buffer zone to the coastal bank. An existing 17 by 32-foot garage is proposed to be removed, and a new 22 by 34-foot garage is proposed. All of this work is either within the coastal bank or within 30 feet of the top of the coastal bank. Also proposed is to remove the existing paved driveway and construct a new driveway with a new footprint as shown on the plan. Grading work and a proposed block retaining wall are also proposed on the coastal bank and within the 30-foot no activity zone. So I would recommend revisions to the plan to pull the proposed garage further forward and possibly more within the existing disturbed area. Hay bales and silt fence are proposed between the work and the resource area as shown on the plan. I did not get a DEP file number for this project at this time, so I would have to recommend a continuance for the DEP number and for plan revisions.
Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, in response to Dave's comment about pulling the project and the footprint forward, we have moved the project forward approximately 10 feet away from the rear property line, 10 feet closer to the street. The reason we have it where it is if you've been to the site, it's a narrow street, it's a dead-end street. This is a very nice property, waterfront property right on the beach. Mr. Sullivan has family and entertains, so we're trying to get some off-street parking because on-street parking just isn't feasible. So trying to balance a number of things, obviously the wetland resource area values and functions versus the overall function of the property given its situation and other restrictions. So we are working within an altered footprint. There's the existing structure, there's the existing paved driveway, there is an existing block retaining wall, or several of them, obviously in bad shape, which is the reason for the reconstruction. So we're trying to balance those, and that's part of the reason why it's located where it is, and that would be our objection to moving this forward. You know, again, we're occupying currently altered areas with hardscapes and/or lawn. The coastal bank that we're on doesn't function as a sediment source. There's a wall at the base of the slope at the coastal dune at the coastal beach, so this bank does not function as a sediment source, but it does function as a vertical buffer to storm damage, which that function will remain and will not be affected by this proposal. It'll be slightly improved in that this old dilapidated structure will be reconstructed to current flood standards. So that's my response to the request about moving and relocating the structure.
What were you thinking about removing? Right now, it's being moved up about 10 feet from where the edge of the garage is.
Yeah, the
further
back-
away from the water. And how much further up were you thinking it might be?
Well, I would say as far up as you can move it to get it further away from the coastal bank. Plus, they're also making it a lot bigger, so you're eating up more space by the size of it.
Yeah, but what we've done to compensate for that is reduce the footprint of the driveway. So overall, it's about a 30 square foot, minor square foot reduction in hardscape.
Okay. Questions on the board?
Across the street.
No.
Wait a second, we're going to ask questions?
Not
We
right
start
now.
at the other end?
Not right now.
Okay.
It's coming back,
Jim?
so.
When you move this, the way you have it now, you're moving the garage up a little bit. It's going to be significant excavation over there in that area, right? I mean, that garage is sunk down already, correct?
Well, what the building is there's a garage, which will be a slab,
Right.
And then that back 10-foot section will be cantilevered,
Oh,
so it will overhang and be supported by piles. So.
Oh, I see that, yes.
So
Okay.
that is done for a couple of reasons, to minimize excavation and work and for compliance with flood zone. We cannot have a foundation there. So that'll minimize the earthwork and the alteration. The alternatives are, to try to rehab this structure in place, which, if you've seen it, would disturb the site as much, if not more, than the proposal you have before you.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else?
Is the parking area bigger than it is now,
No.
or it's more?
Wider. But the driveway itself, I don't have a comparison, but
I think the reason I'm asking is it permeable surface? I mean, what are you going to put there for the
well, we would
driveway?
call for it to be paved.
Asphalt.
We could put in some permeable pavers or something. That would be something to consider, certainly.
Okay, anybody here that wants to speak for or against this project? The recommendation is that there is a consideration to move it further from the coastal bank. And, but we're continuing for what reason? To see if they come back with a redesign?
And for the DEP number.
Oh, that's right, too, we're missing the DEP.
And possible pervious pavement.
Yep. No, I did say, anybody here wants to speak for or against this project, come on down. Oh, come on down and identify yourself, and then let us know what your issue is. No, come on down to the microphones. Yes.
So my name is Blaise Ciolino.
We need to begin,
Oh, you need the thing?
yeah.
Is mine on? I don't.
Yep.
Is mine on?
Yeah, it's yours.
Yep.
My name is Blaise Cioli. I'm here representing Neil Sullivan. He couldn't be here this evening. I clearly understand the concerns of the commission, but what I'm trying to understand, so I can take this back to Mr. Sullivan, is, if we were gonna go back and look at this again, I understand the need for the pervious driveway. I don't see that as an issue. What I'm trying to understand, though, is if we were gonna make a compromise or try to get this thing done, how much are you talking about pulling this back? So the question that you asked earlier is, we are giving up 10 feet of parking now. So we're giving up, a small car or, 3/4 of a truck, basically, 2 cars wide. So we've already given up a couple of parking spots.
Oh,
If we move the building back, to get it completely out, we give up all of the parking for all intents and purposes. We might be able to get 1 or 2 cars in. There is a house beyond this house, so we block egress to that for fire equipment and police and everything else if we start to encroach on the road with automobiles. So what I'm trying to understand is if we would go to Mr. Sullivan and say, look, commission's agreeable, but we want to move this thing back so you literally have no parking now. Is that even practical from the town's perspective? Because where do the people go? So that was my concern, is that if we go back and we repropose, could we agree on some kind of a number? If we take it completely out, he loses effectively all of his parking spots.
Yeah, you probably couldn't take it completely out anyway, because you have setbacks to the street, okay? So you can't build it that
No, I
right
could
up on
take
the
it
street.
completely, we could take it completely out and not violate the street setbacks.
In other words, you'd have to be at least 20 feet off the street.
Right, we could be
Right.
20 feet off the street and outside the coastal bank. But at that point, we've lost like 4 of the 6 potential parking spots that he currently has. And I'm just wondering, like, from a fire apparatus, police perspective, have we now inhibited everyone's ability to get to this gentleman's home that's at the end of the point there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
So
this
the
property.
idea is that if you park on the street, because it is such a narrow street, you limit access beyond your property to
To a house.
a house. Is there any chance you can take more of the yard that's butting the road?
So we have an issue to the westerly side where we're on the property line. We're close to the setback. And to the easterly side, the house exists.
You have some lawn.
I mean, literally none. Remember, this house probably today would never be allowed to be permitted because it's so close to the street. It doesn't meet any of the setbacks.
Oh, it is close. Yep.
It's right there. I mean, I think it's 12 feet or something. It's really right there. The corner of the garage is right
It's
against
actually
it.
right on the property line, more or less. It's not 12 feet.
It's,
Yeah, one
so-
corner of it is
Yeah,
6
in
inches.
fact, it
and-
was
and I
built with
think,
no
and I-
permits, and that's why it ended up
Yeah.
like that.
And the other concern is that I think the building was, I think many, many years ago, the archdiocese or somebody owned this, right? I think the building was built, I don't know how many years ago, as a prayer house or something, and the end of it that sits on in the embankment is significantly deteriorated. So Sullivan's concern is that the building eventually will fall over the coastal bank. It'll fall into that resource zone, and then he's gonna have to get somebody to go down in there and work and get it out of there. So, he's a reasonable person, but I'd like to be able to go back to him and say, look, this is really what we want. The commission would like it another 5 feet or 2.5 feet, or, 5 feet in the driveway that's pervious, or, versus just going back and we try to pick a number and then come back and you say, okay, try it again, and,
It's no rock and a hard spot.
it's a tough
So
spot,
what's
you know?
the,
Yeah, no,
what's
it's
the dimension of the new garage going to be? 2-car garage?
22 by 34.
And the current building is only
Is that for a
slight.
4-car garage?
I have
No,
no
it's,
idea.
no, it's like a one car deep. It's not that.
34 feet?
It's 1-car
No, it's
deep?
that long, no, but, so think about it, it's 34 feet long, right? It's like this piece of paper,
Yeah.
right? But the last 10 feet of it is cantilevered, and it won't be a concrete structure. It'll be a wood cantilevered structure over the coastal bank. You can't drive on it.
So what's the purpose of that?
Well, it exists as that today.
Yeah,
So the purpose of that would be like a workshop or a place to put his fishing tackle gear or whatever. The actual garage space is a concrete slab of 24 by, what's the width, Brian?
22.
22 by 34 is the overall
And
structure.
I think the existing one is, what is it?
17
17,
by 32 or something
Yeah,
like that.
so it's not significantly larger. But I think if the
17 by
compromise
20.
was to leave it where it is and return it to a similar footprint versus trying to pull it towards the road and take away all of his parking, that probably makes better sense just from simply a safety perspective. The gentleman at the end is an older gentleman. He's not well, and to block his access is not.
Intended to block the
No,
road.
but I don't want, don't want to go to Mr. Sullivan and say, look, pull the thing back, give up all your parking, and never have anybody here, because that's kind of where we'd go, right? Do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think from the commission's role is to look at the wetlands resource areas in the bylaws that we have, not to determine whether or not we can provide your client with enough parking for all his guests. Okay, so that's really not the commission's concern.
Okay.
But I do understand your point, and I'm not trying to say that we're trying to force it so that he has nothing or nothing that he's interested in. But again, certain sites are limited based on the characteristics of those sites, and not every site's going to accommodate what everybody wants it to. So again, we run into this all the time. People have sites that they want to do a million things on, and they're just not sizable enough to do it. And there have been additions built onto this house, so space has been eaten up with additions and so on and so forth. So,
Is there any space next to the existing shell driveway that can be expanded for cars?
No, because we're right on the property line in that area.
No, I guess you got some distance
Well-
between the edge of the driveway and your property line. Yeah.
No, maybe one small vehicle.
She's talking about this here.
I'm
No, I
talking
know.
about the existing shell driveway.
Yeah, the one to the east of the house, to the northeast corner of the
One
house,
closer to the,
to the canal.
yeah.
Right, yeah. So that's very, very close to the property line. So maybe you could get one car in that spot there.
This is 37 feet.
There is some space for at least one. I mean, there's so, just, okay, it's going to be continued to the next hearing, waiting for the DEP filing and a discussion of the possibility of moving the garage a little further away from the coastal bank and maybe reducing the size.
40 feet now off the road.
Because if you go in the driveway, what do they do? Park nose to tail for 4 cars, 6 cars into that spot right
Ye-
now?
Yes,
It's tight as it is.
that's
yes.
how they do it
In
now.
the new proposed one will be 6.
The same
yeah.
way. Nose to tail the same way.
Well,
So is existing slab usable, or does that have to be taken out totally? Like if you were to rebuild on the old footprint, is that possible?
So I represented Mr. Sullivan in the addition that was done on the easterly side of the property a couple of years ago. GF was our engineering firm. And when we started construction, we learned that the footings had deteriorated significantly. So my sense is that while the slab may be usable, the frost walls probably aren't, because I can see the exposed frost walls on the southeasterly side of the property facing Onset Island, and all of them, they're just deteriorated from the salt air and water over time, and it's a block construction, so I don't think it would be reasonable to construct a building on top of that. So what we did is we came back the last time, and we were then given additional permitting on the house to put footings in. And I just thought, I advised Mrs. Sullivan this time that, we should just not get back into that where we start this project and then we find out that it's all really rubble. And then we're coming back looking for footings. My sense is that the building could be renovated, but the extensive construction required to do that would be more disruptive to that resource area than if we carefully reached everything from the landward side, took it out, and put it back. That was our concern, is, how much do we really make a mess here? And sometimes trying to fix these things is more difficult, because we can only see what we can see before we start to go in and have our guys dig and do whatever they gotta do. So that was the thought. We certainly could, you can renovate anything, you know that. But we didn't wanna do that much work in the resource area if we could help it.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
any other comments on the project? I'll take a motion. 18th, good, or you want it later?
19's fine, yes.
18th, okay. I take a motion to continue until the 18th. I have a motion. Second, all in favor? Opposed, abstained, will continue until the 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue to hearing, anybody here for the Howland project? Howland project? I'm seeing none. Take a motion to continue until the
So
18th.
moved.
I have that motion. I heard a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Next project is the William Evans Big Block Trust. Anybody here for that one? Yes. Come on up. Green cards, please identify yourself.
William Evans.
Joe Webby, Webby Engineering.
Mr. Bichette will read to the project. No, that's fine.
The project site is at 19 Parkwood Drive, and the project involves the construction of a garage in the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland and within the riverfront area of an unnamed brook and in the buffer zone to a coastal bank. A 20 by 24-foot garage is proposed, approximately 31 feet to the top of the coastal bank and within the riverfront area. A driveway would be installed between the garage and the unnamed paper street as shown on the plan. There are no grade changes proposed. Hay bales and silt fence would be set right on the 30-foot no activity zone line as shown on the plan, and this would be the limit of clearing for the project. So again, this is going to mean that there may be vegetation more or less right up to the building, and that's going to be a continuing condition if approved. The building can't really be pushed closer to the road because of zoning setback requirements. We did get a DEP file number for the project. There's no other alternative location to place the garage on the site, so in terms of the riverfront regulations, that's the only place that the garage can realistically go. So I would recommend the issuance of the order of conditions with the standard conditions and the added conditions that there be no expansion into the 30-foot no activity zone and that this will be a continuing condition for this site.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
No, that I'd like to build it.
Questions on the board?
Now, will there be a door at the back, or is that a solid wall
On the side,
on the side?
toward the house.
Okay.
I have nothing.
This side. Your turn.
Is the driveway gonna be paved with, what, asphalt or?
Yeah.
Question? We'll ask them.
You do impervious driveway?
A what?
Are you gonna put in a solid macadam hardtop?
Asphalt,
Asphalt
yeah, sure.
driveway?
It's only short, though, because you run into the other property, or the street.
Are you asking it could be
Pervious.
pervious? Have you considered putting down pervious
Oh,
macadam?
it could, if you want it gravel, it'll gravel.
Well, I didn't say gravel, but there is, you can get a pervious plaque top. Pavers is another, well, pavers are tough to, pavers are a possibility. So we're looking for something that will allow the water to flow through your driveway as opposed to flow
Run out.
off the driveway and run out.
Well, then I'll make it whatever you'd like.
As long as it's conditioned to be.
It's, if we condition it to be pervious?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be crushed shells, it could be stone, it could be pervious pavers.
Yeah, they make
Yeah.
some nice black stuff.
Yeah, so, is there anybody here that would like to add comments to this project? I'm seeing none. Anything else? I need a motion to close the hearing. I have a motion. I have a second. Hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, the hearing is closed. All right, folks, somebody, you want to grant the project? I need a motion to grant the order conditions with 2 stipulations. Somebody want to do it?
You move to grant the project with, I'm trying to remember what the stipulations were.
There'll be no work done beyond the 30-foot no-work zone, and that
And
we
a
would ask
pervious-
for a pervious driveway.
pervious
Those are
driveway.
the 2
And
conditions.
this is all it's ever gonna be as far as size goes.
Right.
That's the-
Yes.
The first
that-
one.
No additions, yeah.
Yeah. So what did you want to add for the 3rd condition?
No additions to this building.
Well, he can't go beyond, we've already said
Yeah,
no,
that was-
no expansion to the 30-foot no activity zone. You mean more than that?
Well, I think you talked about the idea that there'll be trees growing next to it probably, and, because you can't do any work in it, so he's got to have those, and he can't expand it.
Right.
All right. No expansion, including the 30-foot no activity zone. Okay, I have 3 conditions.
3 conditions.
Need a second?
To the order of conditions, I heard a
Oh.
motion, right? And I have a
Right, and
second.
Standard order of conditions.
And 3 things, yes.
Gotcha,
I have
yeah.
a motion, I have a second, all in favor? Aye, opposed? And before you do any work, see Mr. Prichette for the write-up, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for being amenable.
What's all these? Oh, here's a bunch of Sullivan.
No, yeah,
Dennis next.
definitely. No, I was gonna, you
Nelligan?
guys didn't say anything, I was gonna say something
Nelligan
again,
is
so
next.
that's good.
I think so, let me look.
Yeah.
You can always speak up, I don't mind.
No, I
Skip
wanted to, I
Buzzards
just
Bay
was curious.
Coalition, 'cause she's-
I wanted to.
No,
No,
the
they get
budget,
continued.
she's here for the dam.
No, it's a, no, it's
not
an
on the
RDA.
Those were on RDAs.
Ken Nelligan,
I need to recuse.
is there anybody here for that project? Yes, let the record show that Rob has left at the start of this hearing.
Thanks, Mary.
My name is Ken Nelligan. My wife and I own 156 Cromieset Road and 156 Rear Cromieset Road.
Is this a new plan?
No. It's the one we had at the last meeting.
You have a copy of that? You do?
Thank you.
Have enough?
Yes. I have one. Oh, you're all set, your turn. Guess I need another sheet of paper.
Yeah, so this project site is at 156 Cremisa Road, and the project involves the construction of a pier over a salt marsh within land under the ocean and within a coastal flood zone. Vista pruning is also proposed within the salt marsh, within the buffer zone, to the salt marsh, and within the flood zone. A 4 by 125-foot dock was proposed. At the last meeting, we had continued the hearing because the new engineered plan had not been sent to the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries for their review. It has now been sent to them, and they have reviewed it and commented. So they do have some concerns with same issues that we had raised previously with water depths at the end of the pier, and also potential impacts that the pier might have in terms of shading the marsh. They put in a recommendation that the structure be at least 6 feet above the marsh to the base of the deck stringer to prevent adverse impacts from shading. Also proposed is the removal of vegetation on the site, including trees and saplings. A lot of this work is within the 30-foot no activity zone. The applicant did get a forest management plan to submit as part of his information. But again, some of this work is not consistent with the town's bylaw in terms of the 30-foot no activity zone. So as I had mentioned previously, I would recommend that the pier be denied as it does not meet the requirements of the bylaw because there's little to no water at low tide at this site, and the site, in my view, is just not suitable for a pier. And again, the commission needs to look at this beyond the current owner's potential use for this structure. Also, I would recommend that no cutting work other than trees that are knocked over during storm events be allowed within the wetland or within the 30 feet of the wetland. There are some trees proposed to be removed on the plan that are outside the 30-foot no activity zone, which I would recommend could be approved. So again, we do have a DEP file number and comments at this point from Mass Division of Marine Fisheries, but those are my recommendations.
So if your recommendation means new dock, no cutting work within the 30 feet in wetlands unless damaged by storm.
Right.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I have comments about all of those. One of the reasons we continued the hearing last time was because I brought up a alternate proposal, and that is that there's an exception. In the bylaws, there's a section that talks about buffer zone. And it talks about residential construction, and then it talks about commercial, industrial development, and residential construction. And then it has exceptions. And one of the exceptions that I brought up last week was to have the commission authorize an elevated boardwalk. And the point of that, in accordance with the exception, is that if in the commission's judgment, a reduction of these restrictions is necessary to accommodate reasonable access by path or other least intrusive means of access to other portions of a property or shoreline, as long as there is no other alternative means of accessing the other portions of the property, and that such alteration does not exceed a 5-foot naturally surfaced path or an elevated boardwalk, not to exceed 3 feet in width within the 5-foot pathway. Now, what we're trying to do, and what I've been trying to explain from the beginning that we're trying to do, is we're trying to go from one portion of our land to another portion of our land, and the only way to get to that second portion is over the marsh. And what we'd like to do is protect the marsh. We'd like to get there to the other portion of our land, which extends to the low mean water mark, which is beyond the edge of the marsh. We would like to do that to launch and retrieve kayaks. We also would like to do it to enable people to fish. I have grandchildren, some of them like to fish, and I think it was last year, it might have been the year before, one of them was trying to fish from a rock that's on our property or just off our property, and he slipped and fell. We had to take him to urgent care, and he had to get staples in his arm. So one thing that we'd like to do is we'd like to access that part of our property that's beyond the marsh that goes down to the low water, mean low water line. And one of the things that the bylaws talk about is that a dock construction is typically the least environmentally destructive way of crossing the marsh. So one of the things that happened last week was I pointed this out to you all, and one of the reasons we, or you all continued the hearing was to allow Mr. Pichette an opportunity to look at that.
Okay.
So I don't know if he did, I don't know if he has any comments about that, but to me... Yeah, no, I have some comments. I think the language that you're reading is meant to say that the dock is the best way to cross the marsh in terms of where it would be permitted, okay? So if you don't meet other standards of the bylaw, then it shouldn't be approved. So if you don't have the water depths that one would need to have a pier, then you would not just get a boardwalk approved just because it says in another part of the bylaw that that's the least intrusive way of crossing a marsh.
No,
So,
it
so I
says-
think that's the critical issue here. And the other point you raised in terms of the exception within the 30-foot no activity zone, I believe it was that is if you have no other means to get from one part of your property to another, you have a means to get there, you can walk across it just the way it is, and you've been doing that.
I can walk across the marsh, yes, but the point of this exception is to allow you to protect the marsh to get from one part of your property to the other. Now,
Right, and I would agree that if you had sufficient water depth and the site was suitable for a pier, then I would be 100% in agreement with you.
well, one thing that the Marine Fisheries letter said was that we could accommodate that by having stops on a float. Now, our engineer originally designed this with a float, but in talking to you, it's made pretty clear to me that that wasn't going to be acceptable, so I had him take that off. But the marine fisheries people said I could accommodate the requirement for the depth by having float stops.
Right, that's a standard that they have in terms of their level of regulation, but the town, again, has its own bylaws which are more strict than that.
Okay, but the 2-foot depth is for floats. It's clear in the bylaws that floats are separate from the dock. And the 2-foot depth of water applies to the float, not to the dock. So what I did was we changed the plan. We have a dock. We proposed a dock. Last week I proposed an elevated boardwalk, but we came in with a plan that proposed a dock that went a few feet in, past the marsh and past our land, the end of the mean low water. It has a ladder. One of your concerns was that if not me, somebody in the future might use this. Number one, Cedar Creek is not that deep. People aren't going to be bringing large boats up Cedar Creek. A person isn't going to be bringing a large boat up to a dock that doesn't have a float. It's just not going to be an attractive thing for people to do. So I think the risk is really low with that original proposal. And I think the perfect solution or a compromise would be this exception for an elevated boardwalk. It would enable us to get to that portion of the property that we're trying to get to. And there is no other way to get there except over the marsh. Now, in terms of the other issues that were raised by the marine fisheries in terms of the height, I mean, I don't know if you want me to go into that, but I looked at the study that was referenced this morning, and there's quite a few things in that study that is that I can address that addresses the height. One of the things that the study doesn't have a recommendation. The study says that you can reduce vegetation loss by having that ratio. The study acknowledges that the ratio is 1-to-1. Massachusetts recommended the ratio is 1-to-1. The study says that there are a lot of factors that go into the loss of vegetation under a dock. It didn't recommend a ratio of 1.5-to-1. In particular, it stated that docks and sites that require an east-west orientation over salt marsh to reach bordering waterways would warrant a more conservative height regulations, such as a ratio equal to or greater than 1.5-to-1. It acknowledged that the ratio may not always be practical. It said the report stated that managers can also reduce individual dock impacts to salt marsh vegetation by requiring maximal piling spacing in a north-south orientation. The plan has piling spacings that, which we would adhere to even for an elevated boardwalk, 15 feet between pilings. I originally proposed a dock with 4x4 posts, 8 feet between pilings, but we revised that in accordance with the bylaws. The dock or the elevated boardwalk would be oriented north-south. Another thing that the bylaws require are 6-inch wide deck boards with a 3/4-inch gap between each one. So there's other ways to address the issue of the shading. In addition, if you look at, let's call this an elevated boardwalk, it would be 3 feet wide. A 1.5-to-1 ratio would make the recommended height 4.5 feet. And if you look at the drawing that we submitted, it is actually 3 feet wide of passable space. When you look at the dock requirements in the bylaws, it says 4 feet maximum passable space. And in terms of shading, the issue is the width of the deck. In this drawing, the engineer drew it up so that it's 4 feet wide, but that includes the 6x6 posts. So that takes away a foot. So the actual deck is 3 feet wide. The ratio would be 1.5-to-1 would be 4.5 feet. And the elevated boardwalk would be higher than 4.5 feet for most of its length, if you look at the drawing just the way it is. So I think that addresses all of those concerns in a way that satisfies them.
What's the 8x8 Platform, you said you needed it as a staging point in order to walk up onto your,
That, yes. I mean, if that's the only sticking point,
I'm just-
but that's what I would like it for. To bring kayaks up onto what I used to be a dock, it would be useful, helpful to be able to step up to the platform and then go up a couple more stairs to the top of the dock, which is 4 feet high at that point.
my note said something about wood chips on the path in the wetland. Was that an old topic?
No,
No,
one of the projects
Just
that,
wait a second. It's on the second page of my notes, so must have been a recent discussion. Can it be an elevated boardwalk instead of a dock? That's another question, that was, okay. Any questions on the board?
Yes, the section that, at the end of that walkway, I guess, it says a T section,
yes.
10 feet. Is that in the water, or is that above the water?
Oh, no, that's above the water.
That's above the water.
That would be above the water. In fact, there's a rock right there, if you look at the drawing, right at the edge of our property where this structure would go is a rock.
Right.
And I'd
So-
like to bring it out to there to cover that, so if somebody were to, do something foolish like jump off there at high tide, they wouldn't break their neck on the rock.
So how does somebody get down from there? Is there going to be stairs or what?
Well, the way it's drawn now, there's a ramp. It's a slanted ramp that goes from the land down to that portion of the structure.
Okay.
There's two drawings. Do you have the second drawing?
Maybe I do, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And last time, Mr. Bichette brought up the issue of docks can only be 3 feet, so this T makes it wider than 3 feet, or 4 feet. When I originally proposed it, way back when, it was an L. I'd be happy to change it back to an L. You get people fishing on the end of the structure, and you get, 10, 13-year-old kids. A 3-foot wide, place to stand is not ideal. It'd be nice if I could put an L at the end, and it would be nice, in addition, to give me some space to bring that ramp down to this. But that section would be above the water. There would be a ladder that you'd be able to go down.
So there really is nothing floating in the water?
No. There was a time when the engineer drew up the plans with floats. I can show them to you. I haven't submitted them to the board, to the commission, but there's nothing floating.
Okay.
And I would propose, right now, the way your drawing reads, it goes slightly beyond our property line. The rock happens to be right at the property line. I would bring it back just so it covered that rock.
Yeah.
So it would be consistent with this exception that would allow us to go from one point on our property to another point on the property. That's what I'm proposing.
Thank you.
It seemed clear to me, I mean, Dave recommends this is not going to be built, this shouldn't be built. And that's why the town, made the 30-foot buffer zone. That's to prevent these kind of things from being built in the future, because there's too many of these things. So I think it's pretty clear that, unfortunately, it can't happen. It has to.
Because of the 30-foot buffer zone?
Correct.
Well, this is the exception to the 30-foot
Yeah, but
buffer zone.
that exception is clear, and Dave explained it, was that, you do have access, it's just not the access you like.
Well,
unfortunately.
people that have come to visit the site see that walking back and forth over
I
the
understand
marsh.
I understand where you're coming from, but it just seems that's what the law is put in place for. We don't make the law, the selectmen do, you know what I mean? And I think that's what it's there for.
Well, what's the exception there for?
The exception is there for, Dave, what's the exception there for, Dave? I mean, you seem to understand it better than me, I don't know.
Right, the section of the 30-foot that he was referencing, to me, doesn't apply to this, but this wouldn't be prevented by the 30-foot no activity zone, because this is a project that typically would require a Chapter 91 license, and therefore, there's an exemption for that in the 30-foot no activity zone. But, again, I'm recommending against it for other reasons, in terms of not having, in my opinion, the appropriate water depth that there should be in this location for such a structure. So That's the reason why I'm recommending against it.
So this doesn't fall under the 30-foot no activity zone?
It doesn't, no.
Okay,
This part of the project doesn't. The cutting work and so forth does fall within that,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, my mistake. All right, then.
So I think would you say if the commission wanted to approve this, it could within the bylaws?
No,
Well, okay.
that's my opinion,
We
and I'm
disagree.
recommending that to the board. You may not agree with it, but that's my
The clear
viewpoint.
language that I see right there says that the commission has the authority to do that as an exception, and
Again, I think that part
and the
of the
bylaws don't talk about a 2-foot water depth under the dock. They talk about a 2-foot water depth under the float. So what you're saying is
Dock here, too.
it's not in the bylaws, it's written that way.
Any- Any other questions? Mary, Alyssa, anything else? David, did you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, I'm just curious about this exception. What is the exception he's getting for this? That's,
Well, under the 30-foot no activity zone rule, there's an exception to allow work within the 30-foot if you're building a project that requires a Chapter 91 license. Because for a dock, in a place where a dock's appropriate, you can't build a dock unless you're going to do work within the 30-foot no activity zone. So that was built into the bylaw to allow piers and so forth to be permittable under the 30-foot no activity zone regulation. Okay? So there is that exemption. So what I'm referencing is something in a different part of the bylaw that has nothing to do with the 30-foot no activity zone.
so you can build a dock within the 30-foot no activity zone
Yes.
due to this, okay?
Yeah. If it's appropriate and meets all the other standards, then yes.
You can, okay.
You don't have 2 foot of water, you don't have 2 foot of water. No matter how you look at it.
Yep.
Whether it's afloat or elevated, if you don't have 2 foot of water, somebody dives off that platform, they're gonna bury themselves in the head.
Any other questions on the board? I'll open that to the public. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak for or against this project? Identify yourself and come forward.
Hello. Good evening.
State
My
your
name is Kevin Lynch, 6 Cedar Island Road,
Okay.
and Merry Christmas again. This has been going on since last year, so. But anyway, I represent 55 families of the Cremisa Park Improvement Association who oppose the building of this dock. My family has lived in the area for 80 years, and in those 80 years, I'm pretty sure it looks about the same now as it did back then. No docks, no piers. The dock, one of the points is the dock will impede the natural flow of water and boating. Some of the information regarding the access to the end of that cove that was given by Mr. Milligan is incorrect. At high tide, there are quite a few people, including myself, that fish down there. I have a 13.5-foot whaler. There are many of those. There's bigger boats that can go, okay? And when they come in the fall, it's good fishing, so just a suggestion. Some of that information is not correct. We think this is an inappropriate location for the dock. It will impede the natural flow of water in an already slow flow and environmentally sensitive and critical important marine estuary, increasing the silt buildup. To your point, there is no water there. To your point, there is very little water. But the proposed placement of this dock is over a naturally occurring large oyster and shellfish bed utilized by the Wareham community. And that particular rock that you want to go over is the home to a number of these oysters. And that's really what I have to say. Let some of the other members go ahead and speak their pieces regarding it, unless you have any questions from me.
Please
Thank you.
speak into the mic with your name.
Hi, I'm Joanne Frazier. I live at 9 Conahassett Road. I've lived in Cremisa Park for 30 years, and I am opposed to this dock. This will set a dangerous precedent for the waters restricting public access to open space, which are part of the public trust and allowing it to be used for the private personal, and exclusive benefit of one individual. We hope the Conservation Commissioners will take into consideration the minimal private benefit this dock will provide to one individual with the inevitable and substantial environmental insult to this critically important marine estuary. Further, we propose an alternate that we, the CPIA, would allow him to place his kayaks on our beach area for dry, easy launching. However, he did not take us up on this offer.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Next.
Hi, my name is Steve Albert. I'm kind of the new kid on the block. I bought my home on Mattapoisett Road in March of last year. I moved down here from Weymouth, and I love Wareham. I love the natural beauty of Wareham. The history here, a lot of that went down the tubes in Weymouth. I'm opposed to the dock. I love the natural beauty of the cove. You know, I have a little statement here. I believe the proposed dock will create a hazard to navigation with kayakers, recreational shell fishermen, and the residents of Wareham who frequent the cove for open space recreation. The dock abuts or is directly across from the Marks Cove Conservation Area. There are 5 entities which oversee that area to protect its natural beauty and the variety of habitat within this conservation area. And the creek runs right through there. It's all kind of connected. I've been over in that area walking. I joined the Wareham Land Trust last year because I love nature and I like to help out. There's 5 different entities: Mass Audubon, Wareham Land Trust, Buzzards Bay Coalition, the Wildlands Trust, and the town of Wareham all own that land there. I think the dock protrusion into the creek and cove will destroy what the above referenced conservation area's purposes are, of bringing families and children to learn about the natural beauty and open space of this beautiful cove. And, you know, some people might say, well, it's just a dock. But these, you know, bulldozers don't suddenly come in one morning and everything's gone. It's encroachment, little pieces at a time. I was sorry to see the old Toby house go down, but that's another story. I'm opposed to the dock.
Thank you. Anybody else
Thank
like
you.
to speak?
Yes.
All right.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't already heard?
No, I do. I'd like to talk about turtles. I've lived in Cremisa for over 60 years.
Could I
Wait.
know her name?
Yes, please, me.
Oh, yep, Donna Foley. Donna Foley from
Thank you.
Cremisa Park. I've lived in Cremisa Park for over 60 years. This is not the first time a dock has been proposed for Marks Cove, and the Wareham Conservation has denied it each time. Back in 2016, Dr. Amy Gleason released the endangered diamondback turtles into Marks Cove because it provides the perfect environment for these small, vulnerable turtles to survive. In addition, the box turtles cross the marsh area where the dock is to be sited and will adversely affect them. It is our collective responsibility to protect them. A private dock will only interfere with their development. It cuts across the natural corridor they follow. Their foraging and their nested habitats will be disrupted, as well as their winter hibernation. So I oppose this dock too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Yes, would you like to respond?
Quickly. At one of these hearings, you asked me to talk to the harbor master about the issue of the posts and the silt, and I did, and he said it's not an issue. One of the things that's documented in this information that we've submitted is that the state draws lines where protected species exist, and this is not in an area that's marked by the state as protected species. So Just want the members of the commission to know that, and I think, I'm seeing Mr. Pichette nod in agreement that that is the case. That would have been a non-starter if that were the case. And as far as obstructing traffic, if you look at the drawings, it barely goes out into Marks Cove, the way I'm proposing it. So, I have 5 separate projects. Do you want me to address some of the other ones?
On this site?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the walkway.
Okay, the walkway. Yes. We want to do some minor maintenance on the footpath. Some of the bushes and trees are encroaching on the footpath. As I mentioned at one of the hearings also, there are roots that are exposed, and they present both a tripping hazard and I'm concerned about the roots themselves. I don't want to damage the roots. So one of the things that I was trying to get feedback on from the very beginning is what could I do to protect the roots and to remove the danger. And what we did after one of the hearings was we asked a forester to come out and as Mr. Bichette mentioned, Mr. Philip Benjamin developed a cutting plan for us. And while he was there, I asked him about the footpaths, and he recommended covering the paths with wood chips to protect the tree roots and to reduce the likelihood of tripping.
That's where I got the wood chips from.
Yeah, and that's marked on the drawing. That was one of your requests, was that I have it marked on the drawing. There's also some deciduous trees that are outside the 30-foot zone. To the best of my knowledge, the trees were planted by the original owner. We would like to remove them. So that's one of the projects. I don't know if you have any questions about that.
What are you planning to remove the trees and take the roots? Or are you planning to leave the stumps?
I would cut it level with the ground.
Leave the stump, leave everything there. It's not going to be level, but you're going to cut it down as far as you can and leave
I'm
it.
assuming that's the preferred, is that what you'd prefer me to do, or would you prefer me to do something else?
I'm just asking what you have planned. I mean,
This is the trees outside the 30-foot no-work zone
Yes,
and within the 100-foot buffer.
they're on the house side of the stone wall that's on the drawing.
Normally, we recommend that you cut to the ground and leave the stumps as opposed to trying to dig them out. It's less invasive.
That's fine.
Okay, that's projects, clearing the trees and working on the path. What were the other two?
Well, I put those together, the path and those 3 trees. Then we've got, let's see, the dock and the dinghy, we've got the vista, and we've got the cutting plan for the pine trees.
Okay.
The pine trees I've talked about before. In researching this issue, one of the things I discovered is that the Miles Standish State Park has a management plan, and under the management plan, I've discussed this before, but I'm not sure everybody was here at the time. They say that the area here is essentially pine barrens, which is made up of pitch pine, sandy soil, pitch pine, and oak trees. And what happened back in the 30s was the state planted hundreds of thousands of red pine and white pine. They did it in order to create a crop that could be sold. And that was the intention. It wasn't to let them grow forever, it was to let them grow up and then be harvested. In the normal cycle of things, the pine trees would grow up, they'd catch fire, they would burn down the entire forest, and the pitch pine would survive, and the oaks would come back. But that's not really the best way to do it. So Miles Standish has burned, under controlled burning, over 300 acres of the forest in Miles Standish Park. In their management plan, they say that another method would be mechanical cutting. And there's a couple of instances, I've given you newspaper articles about the Massachusetts trusts, the trustees of the land over here in Wareham, where they've clear-cut 42 acres of land for the same purposes. They actually got federal funding to do that. And they wanted to protect the habitat of the, I think it was the New England cottontail rabbit. Because what happens, if you read the literature on the website for Miles Standish, the pine trees will grow up, they'll shade out everything else, and the brush and the undergrowth that the animals need is shaded out by the pine trees. So one thing we did was we had Mr. Benjamin come out and, let's see, he developed a cutting plan for us, which you have. Mr. Benjamin has a Bachelor of Science degree in Forest Resources from the University of New Hampshire. He's been a full-time private consulting forester since April of 1978, focusing on the management and stewardship of woodlands on the southeastern Metro West
Did he
area of
identify
Massachusetts.
the location of the trees that he's recommended to be cut?
Yes, that's on the, it's in the plan and it's on the drawing that you have in front of you. One of the things you asked for was that to be located on the drawing. And he's been a representative for the MAPF Forester Licensing Committee for the Commonwealth. He's also on the Board of Directors of the Wildlands Trust. And he's a certified forester, certified by the Society of American Foresters. So he developed this cutting plan.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
All of those circles on the plan, is that the proposed trees to be cut?
No. The circles probably, if anything, represent the trees that are going to remain.
Okay.
There are some quite magnificent oaks on the property. And the pine trees are growing up underneath the crowns of the oaks.
Through there, okay.
And he actually found fungus growing on some of the needles of the pines, which indicate that there's an overcrowding situation, there's going to be stagnation, and it's an unhealthy situation. And in order to preserve the oaks and protect them and let them obtain the nourishment they need from the soil without competing with these other trees, he identified the trees that should be cut. He went out and used paint to identify each one that would be cut. He described them in the plan. The plan has been submitted to DCR. Did I get that right? Yeah, DCR. The objective is to enhance the wildlife habitat. I don't know if you've read the forest cutting plan or if you want me to read it, but it's...
Nope, we have it. I looked it.
He explains why it makes sense to do this. And he says the thinning and removal of the developing competing white pines and other trees will be crucial to the long-term survival of this impressive oak woodland by minimizing the stress of stagnation and overcrowding. A vigorous and productive forest also helps to protect and maintain water quality on and near this property by serving as a cleansing buffer with increased ground absorption and the filtering of any potential runoff. So you could actually say that it enhances or promotes what the bylaws are intended to
Ms.
promote.
Burchett, you're recommending that, let me get my notes. No cutting work within the 30-foot or wetlands unless damaged by storm, which means there are some items within the 100-foot buffer zone that can be removed.
Correct.
So we're looking at this plan. Can you be specific? Yep.
Well, there's more to be said about that.
Okay. Yes, I saw Mr. Benjamin's cutting, but he does not take into effect the 30-foot no work zone.
Correct.
Am I not hearing me? Am I not into the speaker?
One of
Heard
the
Mr. White complain.
One of the provisions in the bylaws is that this is on page 19, the no activity zone requirements set forth in that section shall not apply to site work that is defined as the normal maintenance or improvement of land in agricultural use under 310 CMR 10.04 agriculture.
Okay.
And the cutting that we're proposing meets that definition.
So this is agricultural land?
Well,
No.
I don't think so.
That's not what the regulation requires.
Did I just misunderstand what you just read? You know,
There's a definition in the regulation that's cited in the bylaws. First of all, the first page is from the bylaws. Highlighted the section.
Thank you.
And then if you look to the page that are stapled together, there are definitions. There's a definition of agriculture. There's a definition of what,
all right.
So if, in order to meet that definition of land and agricultural use, you have to have an active farm where you're raising or selling a crop, which you don't have.
no, that's not true.
That is true.
Well,
You can't claim you have land and agricultural use when you don't have an agricultural use.
It says on the second page of what I've handed you, that land and agricultural use may lie inactive for up to 5 consecutive years unless it's under a United States Department of Agricultural contract for a longer period, or it is used for the forestry purposes described in 310 CMR 10.04, Agriculture B 14 through 17. And
are
15...
you harvesting these trees?
15, if you read 15, notwithstanding the use of the words for commercial purposes in the first sentence of 310 CMR 10.04 agriculture, if you want to follow along, I'm about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages into what I handed you. 15, at the bottom of the page, notwithstanding the use of the words for commercial purposes in the first sentence of 310.1004, the cutting of trees within resource areas in the buffer zone by owners for their own use, and it gives some conditions. That's one of the uses that's authorized
Okay.
under this definition.
So you're going to cut the trees down for board feet, right?
I'm cutting them down, that's what it says.
Yeah, for board feet.
For board
Are you
feet.
using them for lumber?
I think that these trees, some of them, would make very good,
This is not agricultural use, that you can, spin whatever you
Wow.
want, but this
Okay.
doesn't meet the
plain
definition
language
of
is right
agricultural
there.
use, no.
All right.
You-
Again,
All
I
right,
disagree.
I think we've gone over enough.
But-
Um,
What about the exception to the 30 feet that talks about enhancing,
Mr. Bichette said this is not an issue with the 30-foot. Part of it is the depth of water at the end
Well,
of
he's
it.
talking about the
the-
cutting work.
The
So-
cutting work, okay.
yes. So what
I-
is it
I
that
got
you're
lost.
trying to refer to at this point?
there's an exception in the bylaws that the commission could exercise if they think this will enhance wildlife, if it's a wildlife enhancement project. I think it
Yes,
fits that.
That actually is an exemption that this could potentially fall into if the commission considers that to be the case.
All right.
But
I think
that's
that-
something the commission would have to evaluate and determine if they feel that that's the case or not. And for the commission to determine whether or not this is just being used to promote vista improvement for the site versus the actual intended use of wildlife habitat improvement.
We're not clear-cutting this area. We're trying to preserve the oaks, and by taking down the pines, create an environment where bushes and vegetation can grow, which will enhance the wildlife area. That's what's discussed in the cutting plan, and that's why we're proposing it. That's what I said from
How many
day one.
pines are you thinking of taking down that are in the wetlands?
I don't have an exact count. Many of them are maybe 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter, some are bigger. Every one of them is painted. Some members of your commission have come out and seen it.
As I've said, Madam Chair, I'm fine with the cutting work outside the 30-foot, no activity zone of the wetlands, but my recommendation is still the same for what I've already stated.
Okay. Any other comments in the public? What would the board like to do?
Well, what about the vista? That's a separate thing. There's a 60-foot section it's described on the map from the western boundary of our property to about 60 feet in. There are trees that are There's a letter
Are they
that,
within the 30-foot no-work zone?
some are, some aren't.
They're part of, the recommendation is no cutting work done within the 30-foot no-work zone or the wetlands, and that includes some of your Vista work.
All right, but
Outside of that, I'm understanding that Mr. Burchett has no problem with you cutting the trees outside of the 30-foot.
I believe that some of those trees, if not all of those trees, are endangering or will endanger our house, and then the time to take care of them is now. Or when I can actually take care of them without having to get bucket trucks in there to cut them down or to cut them off the roof of my house. Mr. Benjamin has sent me a letter which I provided to you, in which he says that they're well within striking distance over time with the wind blowing in from the northeast. We're in a wind velocity zone. The crowns of the pines are going to act like sails. What's happened is the insects have eaten some of the very tops of the trees, and they've grown additional crowns, and they're going to act like a sail. There's past wind damage that's clearly evident, with several eastern red cedars within the vista blown over the direction of the house.
Okay.
And as he points out, and as what happened with the cedars, is that the uprooted trees will expose and destabilize the soil around the root ball.
There's
Now,
the 30-foot.
He recommends that the trees be taken care of now before they grow any taller.
Now,
Mr. Bichette has come out and visited the site, and he told me that I didn't have to worry about the trees hitting my house because they will fall down before they get tall enough to hit my house, or words to that effect.
now,
So-
on the plan, I'm just going to ask, I have a lot of circles, and I need to understand what each one of these circles mean. I have some that are more faded than the others.
Yeah.
It was awful hard to tell which ones are the circled ones.
What we're talking about within,
Big circles and little circles.
all right,
Is there a,
Bigger trees.
yeah, well, they're bigger. Okay, but there's nothing to tell me which one of these are deciduous, which one of these are pine, or something that you can take down with a lop, or something that needs a chainsaw. But what we're saying is that if it's outside the 30-foot zone, you may take them down. Within the wetlands and within the 30-foot zone, the answer is no.
well,
Is what I'm hearing right now is the recommendation from Mr. Bichette, including Vista.
everybody agrees, including Mr. Bichette, that these trees are going to fall down. The only question is, are they going to get tall enough to hit the house before they blow
The
down?
ones within the 30-foot no-work zone?
Yes. The work zone was imposed in 2010. The house was built in 2000.
I'm sorry, if I'm looking at this plan, I see no circles except for a few of them in the 30-foot no-work zone. Most everything is between, most everything is between the house and the 30-foot.
This is the 30-foot.
Oh, what was the purple one? Oh, that's the AE 18. Okay, so I can, okay, so there are some that can be removed.
There are
outside
two.
the
There are
30-foot.
two
And some
endangering the
deciduous.
house that can be removed.
Yes,
Altogether, there are 7 white pines and 3 pitch pines.
yep.
The
So
time to remove them would be now, before they damage the work zone, the buffer zone, and before they damage the house or its occupants.
All right. Thank you. Is there any other questions from
If
the
I
board?
can't, if I can't take them down, could I at least top them off?
You're gonna top them off, you're gonna kill them.
Well, that's not what our forester said.
You get rid of all the green stuff on the tree will dry, it will die.
No, you wouldn't top them down that far.
You want a top for Vista.
No, I want a top to save my house.
Your house is how many feet away from some of these pine trees? Other than the two that are out of the 30-foot no-work zone? Can you
That's
give me a measure of this one?
now. They're going to grow tall enough to fall on the house, and now's the time to take care of them.
Yeah. So, the first one inside the 30-foot no-work zone is how far is that one from the house, from the deck? 45 feet? Okay,
Closest one.
the closest,
Yeah,
for 50 and
even further.
further. All right. I think I've heard enough. Has the board heard enough to say what you'd like to do? You want to, are you comfortable closing the hearing and making a decision?
I just have one more comment.
Okay.
So, under the Chapter 91 licenses, we're here to protect these wetlands, right? And it says here on this Part B, 2B, within our bylaws, it says, projects requiring Chapter 91 license, freshwater dock projects, blah, 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 or other coastal engineering deemed by the Conservation Commission to necessarily protect the interests of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. So is this dock protecting the Massachusetts wetlands? Is that what we're doing here? I mean, that under Chapter 91, that would be why we would,
One of the
we'll let
things-
you to have this dock, because you're going to be protecting the wetlands by building your dock.
No, if you,
Is that
if you
correct?
go onto the Massachusetts Commonwealth website, it says in the frequently asked questions that one of the purposes of Chapter 91 is to guarantee the access of a landowner to his property from the water.
Okay, to his property. So
And that's
if we
what-
allowed you to build a boardwalk to the end of your property, that would be fine?
Yes.
So the end of your property line would be
Where the rock is.
just right there, and not out into the water. That would be good with you?
Yes.
Yeah, but if it doesn't go in the water, what is he gaining? The idea is to
Well,
take the kayak to
Just
the
following
water.
the spirit of the law, I don't know.
Sorry, Kenny.
All my life.
You want to speak into them?
All my life I've been in this town. I've shellfished with my dad. And I've always been under the understanding that the property owner that owns property at the edge of the water only owns to the high water mark, not the low water mark that I've been hearing you say numerous times. And that's irking me now.
Okay.
Well,
That's it. That's another topic, that's another issue. Now,
Well, he's saying
Yeah.
the rock is on his property line. If
But
the
also,
rock
he's
is,
saying he's getting to
well,
his property.
one at a time. Kenny, you didn't, Alyssa?
okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask the same question, because most of the properties, only things that have been grandfathered in, if you will, by deed, go down to the low water. It's by deed. only.
That's outside of
That's
what
not-
we're
that's
looking
not-
for
that's-
here.
Yeah,
Reason that
just
he's saying
to,
he wants
well,
to
just to
do
clarify that issue, in Massachusetts, property owners do own to the low tide. That's the norm, okay? Unless otherwise stated indeed, but typically, yes, it is to the low water mark.
Okay. But his property doesn't extend to the low water mark.
Okay.
It goes to the high water mark, so.
Well,
All right.
some properties where there's a specific property line that ends at a fixed point, that's the case. On properties where the property line is just the coastline, then it's the low tide mark. So it depends on the circumstances, but that's not really an issue. as
Okay,
far as
Yeah.
I'm
okay,
concerned.
okay.
Okay. Commission, what would you like to do? Close the hearing and make a ruling? Then someone needs to close the hearing. I can't make the motion.
Motion to close.
I have a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor of closing the hearing? Aye. Opposed, abstain, the hearing is closed. Now I need someone to make the ruling.
Or you could wait
Or
21 days if you want
wanna-
to
you wanna-
discuss it.
We can the hearing is closed, but we can continue discussing for 3 weeks
For the conditions.
for the conditions.
I'm willing to put it away. I mean, David's recommendations is David's recommendations. That's what he does. He
so-
knows the laws. That's what he's here for.
Is that your motion to
That's my
adhere to
motion.
David's
Second.
recommendation?
Yep.
And I have a second. All
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstained. Mr. Bichette will give it in writing what the conditions, the reasons why. We will have no dock, no cutting work within the 30-foot or wetlands unless damaged by storms. I believe those are what I'm hearing for the conditions.
And your wood chips. Are
No,
those on the conditions or
didn't,
no?
not part of it.
And is that a vote?
Yes, all in favor of that? I think we had a, all in favor?
had a
We had a vote. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob, you coming back?
Yeah, he's coming back.
That was good.
Okay.
No, that wasn't good.
Make a note that Rob has returned at 9:05. We have,
That was the most amazing one I've ever seen.
there have been 3 things brought up before Dave that had appeared, they come up to him before the, we can't do it after the meeting. Open law. What do you want to talk, then you don't want to
All you're doing is getting an opinion as to the process. That's all you're doing.
Okay,
So,
we don't have a 24-hour rule on our agenda?
that's your call. If you want to bring it up, that's your call.
The end result would have been much different, but I think the aggravation level could have gone way down.
We still have
Do you want to
this.
do certification of compliance? Let's go to the certification of compliance for
say?
77 Green Gate Lane. Is it good?
I was recused.
Oh, you were kidding.
Oh, sorry, John Cornish wanted to continue until
It's now, right?
12/18. I need a motion for that continuance.
So,
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. John Cornish Stonebridge is continued until the 18th. Is there anything else? Certification of compliance, 77 Green Gate Lane. Are we good?
There was a small stone retaining wall built on this property that wasn't part of the plan. This was for an addition at this site. There was nothing reflected along the edge of the foundation, but they did build this small retaining wall out of some stone that existed at the property, and they didn't really put any filter fabric behind it. So, you could potentially have some erosion from behind it. It is a smaller wall that only stretches for maybe 8 feet or so. It's not super significant. I wanted to point it out to the commission so you know that there's a discrepancy, but it's up to you if you want to let it go or if you want to require it to be modified or have the person come in and get,
If it's not significant, do you have a problem with letting it go?
With a fine for building something outside of compliance?
Yeah, that'll work.
Well, what I also would like to know, does this, if water gets behind it, is this gonna go down? Is it right on the bluff there?
it's not on the bank, it's right up against the foundation of the house, which does slope
Pretty
down the
close.
side
Yeah,
of the
it does
house.
slope, yeah.
I can show you on the site plan if you want to take a look at it.
All right, so you're saying it's 8 feet of wall was built without a permit,
Right,
and it was built incorrectly?
right.
Why are we even talking about leaving it there?
Did it itself, when
Does it matter if it's 2 feet of wall, 8 feet of wall, or 80 feet of
Probably
wall?
wanted something to do with the extra stone that came out of the construction.
Well, that's convenient for them, but not for our purpose and continuations of our purpose.
This is flat right here.
That's flat there.
Then it drops from there, so this is the flat space.
Was it retaining, there's something behind it, right?
Yeah, there's land that comes up to it, and then this is maybe 2.5 feet high, just to retain this land. There used to be like a concrete little stairway there that they
Right, that went
removed.
up.
And so they had this stone, and they just figured, let's put this here to
This
help
is
contain
like-
this.
It looks like it's much better job done, but it's sort of like that one we looked at, and he had the staircase on one side, and we had to take it out and add some plantings and so on and so forth.
I would say-
I'm sure he loved to work around it.
Yeah, so it's not a huge thing.
If he removes
It's
the
not the
stone,
point.
what does it mean?
It's not the
Right.
point. The point is, my point is that it was built without a permit, it was built incorrectly. Have them come back in, pull a permit, and build it right.
Yeah, I would say that would be,
Whether it's
that's why-
2 feet, 8 feet, or 80 feet,
right,
that's
'cause I
what
do
we should
believe
do.
that over time, you are gonna have sinkholes
Okay.
develop behind it.
Is that the request of the commission? Commission?
Yes.
30-foot zone?
It would, because it was already,
There was steps there and stuff like that. We just, the recommendation.
So, yeah, so there's an exception for these people. Just have them come in, pull a permit, dismantle what's there, and put it back together correctly.
Okay. All right.
It's fine.
I mean, should,
That's the right thing to do, and isn't that why we're here?
I mean, should we,
Regardless of how big it is,
should
or
it get,
how easy
should
it
get
would be to
fined
forget
also?
it?
Is that what you're
When
saying?
he comes back,
Then there should, and we did do the fine thing, so there should be a fine.
when
Okay,
he comes back,
okay.
with the, so that no certification of compliance until he comes back and gets the document and get permitted to build that stone wall
Right.
correctly.
Right.
We have 3 questions that have come up after the fact. Now, they're not on the agenda. We don't have a 24-hour rule on our agenda. The discussion is whether or not, I don't want to take it after the meeting because it would definitely hit open meeting laws. I believe we would hit open meeting laws if we even discussed it, but I would be willing to take it and discuss it now with no vote, but just to discuss it before we close the meeting. That's my preference. It's up to the commission as to whether or not you'd like to
Follow
do
your lead,
it.
that's why
I
you're the
don't
boss.
want to do it after we close.
Doesn't anything that the chair deems necessary to discuss is able to be discussed?
Usually, but it's not on the agenda as, yeah.
Even if it's not on the agenda.
I mean, I would prefer to discuss it in open meeting, and that's what we'd like to do. So, Mr. Bichette, will you bring them, I can't do it after the meeting. It's violate open meeting law. Okay, so here, you can have the 3 items that you want to discuss, and
Yeah, there
one of
was-
them's you.
Yep, there was the project that we recently permitted over at the Horseshoe Mill Dam for the dam removal for Buzzards Bay Coalition. We had an approved plan, and there's an interest in changing the plan.
Right.
Okay? And so that's why Sarah's hanging around all night here
Hi,
to
Sarah.
consider this. It involves changing the access point to get to the river from what we approved to a different part of the river for ease of the contractors getting at it. But again, it's not according to the plan we approved, so it's not something I can just say, yeah, go and do that, you know? So that's the purpose of this being something I wanted to have the commission consider as to what you would want to do with
It's
it.
not
So
a permanent.
this is down behind the school.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so where were they, I know the area, so where were they entering
Yeah,
and
I
where
have,
do they
I
want to
have the
enter?
plan that I can
Okay.
show you.
Looks like she's got some maps there. Yeah.
If it's helpful, I have a sketch of where we're proposing to add.
Bring it up. So this is nothing permanent, it's just a temporary access point to do the work.
So, yeah, so it's this little area in red, it's a 15-foot wide swath.
Yep.
It's all right, she'll sit at the table and talk about it.
And that's a picture of the area.
Oh, yep, okay.
So, all the access.
Wasn't this where you're gonna have a launch point?
Yeah.
No.
Now they want to
So,
come through
so
this.
Sarah Quintal, Buzzards Bay Coalition.
Okay, Sarah, talk to us.
Sure. So, so work has started at the site. The contractors are mobilized, erosion controls have been going in, and the work is progressing well. We're still right at the early stage of work, and the contractors had recommended to us that we add an additional access point into the river immediately on the west side of the dam. Currently permitted, we have an access point on the east side of the dam, which during the design phase made sense because there was already an existing path that went down to the water from that location. So we figured stick with the area that would require not a lot more widening. But the bridge itself was assessed by a structural engineer during our design phase, and the structural engineer found it to be structurally sound for what's intended, and also determined that it could handle typical construction vehicles. But that engineer could not determine what the weight load maximum was for the bridge. Because the bridge was built so long ago, there was no plans available, so they can't tell us, well, how many tons can it hold? But of course, the contractor is now asking us, how many tons can it hold? And we can't give them an answer because it's such an old bridge that doesn't have design plans, and you can't see what you can't see under the concrete. So, from a safety perspective, the contractor has requested that we consider, and that I bring to the commission, whether or not it would be okay to make a field adjustment of a temporary access way into the work area immediately on the west side of the bridge. So it'd be a 15-foot wide swath down the bank. That bank stretch already does have disturbance proposed at the toe as well as at the top. And the swath itself isn't all that fantastic either. It's largely invasive brush. There are 2 trees that would need to come out, which you can see in that photo. But it would be a temporary access way so that they don't have to drive. They have a particularly heavy piece of equipment that they feel is what's necessary in order to take out the dam. And they have some concerns that the bridge might not be able to hold it because, again, we can't tell them what the weight maximum is for that bridge, and they don't want to destroy the bridge either because we are hoping to refurbish it and have that continue to be the pedestrian access for this conservation area. So in addition to their equipment, there's also a large amount of stone that needs to come into this work area in order to put the scour protection for the bridge abutments as well as the Department of Marine Fisheries requested riprap in the channel. So the west side of the bridge is certainly less disturbance from the perspective of the equipment doesn't have to go over the bridge, traverse over the bridge, and potentially cause structural damage to the bridge.
We don't want the bridge falling down.
Right. So as far as that particular stretch of bank, so at the toe, we're already proposing excavation and stone scour protection, which has been permitted. And at the very top, it's already the main access way over the bridge. So both sides of that bank are already, in the work zone, and that swath itself is largely not great vegetation. We're already proposing bank stabilization immediately on the north side of the bridge. That hatch area, just across that pathway, has been eroding, and that area is going to get stabilized with erosion control blanket and live stakes. So we would propose the same restoration method on this temporary work access area.
Mr. Bichette, your comments on this? I know it's not to plan.
Right, so the alternatives would be for them just to take smaller loads across the existing bridge and use the site as it was permitted.
But they had a piece of equipment that
Could be too heavy.
Could be too
The
heavy,
equipment
and
could
they
be too
can't-
heavy.
Well, that's the way they had planned to do it right along. So the reason why they wanted the change is so that they can bring more stone in one load versus small trips all the way across with a smaller vehicle, basically.
Well, part of it is you never know when you're in design phase and permitting phase and all that, you don't have a contractor selected. You haven't gone to bid yet. And so it's impossible to know exactly what a contractor has for equipment and what they feel is going to be necessary to do
So your contractor right
it.
now is concerned that the bridge will not hold his equipment with or without rocks on it.
The equipment that he feels is adequate for doing the job.
Yeah, I think they have the equipment to do it the way it was permitted. It's just going to be easier for them to do it this way with this additional access, which I'm not per se 100% opposed to, but there's details that to me need to be understood with this because you are now clearing wetland that is an undisturbed sloped bank for the most part. So, it's not just something that you should be willy-nilly just allowing without detail and knowing how it's going to be treated, how it's going to be restored, so on and so forth.
So if you flip to the back side of that, I did include a copy of detail A on the upper left-hand side that shows the undercut bank stabilization that will be happening, again, just 20 feet north of this stretch for the bank stabilization area. So in that particular stretch, there's stone toe boulder that's going, and fill that's coming in to replace the eroded material. And then on top of that, we're putting in loam and erosion control blanket and live stakes to vegetate it in densely with native shrubs. So on the south side of the dam, we're proposing that temporary work access area. We don't need to be filling back all the eroded soil, because it's not that quite the same piece. But basically from the water line up, we would be putting in, basically taking out the riprap when we're done with the access, taking out the riprap, making sure that we would be putting down seed and blanketing it, and then putting in live stakes through that, so that it would come back actually in better condition than it is now, in the sense that.
Nothing but invasives.
Yeah.
But you're cutting trees out of there.
There's 2 trees that do need to come out. One is small, like pretty small, and then the other one it was tough to see exact diameter because there's so much thorny stuff all the way around it, but roughly maybe 6 to 8 inches or so in diameter.
Wait long enough, the bittersweet.
So you would want to use that and still keep the access on the other side?
We
Or
wanna-
just flip it, so you're not gonna do the access on the other side?
We wouldn't want to eliminate that access on the other side, because we have to do work on both sides of that channel. So being able to get in and out of the river on both sides is important, but the heavy equipment access, particularly for this machine that would be doing the hammering for the spillway, that, as well as getting in the heaviest of the stone, the contractor feels is much safer to do from this west side.
Any questions?
You said that they're already working on the base of that area, and they're already working on the top.
They're
What is the
prepa-
square
yeah.
footage? We know it's 15 feet wide. What's
Mhm.
that would not ordinarily be disturbed?
Yeah, so it's probably about maybe probably 6 to 8 feet of a drop, more or less.
Yeah, I think what he's talking
So
about
under
is.
100 square feet
Yeah.
is what you're proposing to disturb that wouldn't have been disturbed anyway.
No,
More
no,
or
you're
less, well,
talking
15 by
probably
8.
15 feet wide by probably 25 feet, 20 to 25 feet long.
Is that including or not including the area that's going to be disturbed anyway? Because they're already disturbing, they're already going to do something at the bottom, a couple of feet up.
Which was gonna be from the other water
Right,
side.
right,
So you
and they're
really
already
would-
doing something at the top, a couple of feet down, or,
They
so
weren't
there's
really
really
do-
only a middle.
Yeah, in the middle, like I said, the
That's-
top. the
that's
top
what I'm
area-
looking for.
Right, the top area wasn't much disturbance.
Sure, because they're just kind of driving by it.
Yeah, so if I was to guess, again, without actually knowing specifically
ju-
where the points are, I'm just guessing that it's gonna be 20 to 30 feet of access area that's,
And tell
I
you,
was just trying to remember the slope. I was in there
And
a
it's
couple of months
pretty-
ago. And
it's steep in that spot where you drop into the water.
Right, so they'd be putting in riprap to create
Be filling
a
it
slope.
in, basically, to
Right.
create a ramp for themselves.
well, I have no problem getting rid of the vegetation that's there. It's nothing but invasives. But that's, board, any comments on it? I mean, this will not be a vote, it'll just be a discussion as to whether or not we're gonna ask them to come back with a full plan or accept this modification. Well, I mean,
I'd ask for the full plan, but I'd be leaning toward allowing them to do it, depending on what that plan states. That would be my
which
feeling.
means we would need a public hearing and notification and all that goes with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of hate to do that, but he's also right, it's not a willy-nilly, yeah, go ahead, we'll just scribble it in, so to speak. It's more,
Okay.
it just deserves more than,
A discussion.
yeah.
So we were hoping that it could be a field directive informed by the informal discussion with the commission tonight. We don't really feel as though waiting until the next hearing is prudent, because we're already seeing our winter storms, and we're trying to get out of the water by the end of December so that we can beat the worst of the storms and hopefully not get another blizzard in the meantime.
And the choice is that he has to deal with what we've been permitted.
Yeah, so I will discuss that with the contractor tomorrow and see if they feel as though it's worth
Either that,
waiting or risking trying to
I like,
access over the bridge.
I think there's some pluses here, and one is that you know, it's your organization and you actually know how to put things back together in the right way, and I'd like to see that plan, because I think it's too big to just say, yeah, go ahead, kind of thing, and it's not big enough to say, absolutely not. So where does it leave us? We gotta kind of cover our,
so we're looking for an admin to the order of conditions. Is this a feeling I'm getting? I'm not gonna ask for a vote because it's not on the agenda. This is just a discussion, but I get the feeling that we're gonna look for either that or your contractor goes with what has been planned.
Is there any way to temporarily reinforce the bridge?
Not further than what's there now. We see the I-beams that are under there. We anticipate that they're connected in a certain way, but you can't guarantee what you can't see encased in concrete.
All right.
Well, also, too, I mean, they originally were going to do it the way it was planned, right, with different equipment. They could probably get that equipment, maybe. Is that possible?
Mobilization is Monday, but
Yeah,
again,
okay,
I'll have
that's
that.
good, that's good, yeah,
I'll have that
yeah.
conversation with them tomorrow.
Okay.
One thing that I was curious about is, either way they do it, how would they get the volume of stone? Like, what were they proposing to use to get it from one spot into the river? In other words, what machine was gonna pick up a certain amount and put it somewhere?
So the way that they were describing it to me, ideally, they would have the stone be on a triaxle so they can get several tons at a time down to the access point. But again, so
They would wanna back a truck right up and dump it, kind of.
essentially, I mean, there'd another step in the process there, but essentially get the stone as close to the bridge and to the accessway as possible on a triaxle so that you can move, a significant amount. And keep in mind, some of the stone that we're using, they're large stones, so the boulders that we're proposing for the scour protection along the bridge, those can weigh up to about 15 tons, like 15 tons for 3 stones. So, and there's several stones needed. So it's a lot of movement. And so they're concerned that doing a lot of trips with a lot of weight is just going to be very taxing on the structure.
Okay. That's,
Thank you for discussing it tonight.
Put a cruiser in a ditch down there.
yeah, okay.
Is that one of the things we're
Because
going to find?
It was where the granite, that little spillway on this side of the bridge, where the edge of the woods, there was a little spillway there, and there was granite laid across. It was supposed to be a bridge. Yeah, well, they weren't all there.
Okay. Thank you.
Good to know. Thank
When
you.
you want to discuss, you have a plan modification, Maple Grove,
Well, this
Maple
is,
Park.
this is another project where we approved a plan and they want to modify the plan.
Get here from,
This is a case where we
get into it.
had approved an underground storage tank in Maple Park for waste from trailers, and we approved a 2,000-gallon tank, and now they would want to put a 5,000-gallon tank. So it's the same general work area, but again, it's a different plan than what we approved. So again, the question is, do they come in and get an amended order, just like, and so I'm assuming the same,
Amended order.
yeah.
That's all.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know enough about tanks. Is it deeper by 3,000, or is it wider and deeper by 3,000?
They're doubling
Well, yep,
capacity.
come back and ask them to submit an amended order of conditions to
okay.
go for the bigger tank. And the third one was?
The third one was we have somebody who's trying to apply for a building permit for a small deck at 92 Pinehurst Ave they want to put a generator at this house, which is a house on stilts. And so they have to put the generator up high as well.
Right.
And so they have to build a small deck to accommodate this thing, and that's going to be in the flood zone and in the buffer zone. So,
Can they hang it off the existing structure and not do anything to the ground?
well, he seems to think he has to put legs to hold it up.
How far up does he
May not
have
be
to
true.
go?
I don't think that's
8 to
true.
10 feet,
I mean,
So,
how
okay.
big a deck?
6 by 7.
Just
Big a
to,
generator.
I don't know that. If the
Usually
deck
I-
is 6 by 7 feet in size,
Just to hold the generator?
right.
Yeah,
And he
I
has gotta
don't
get-
see why you couldn't do that in steel and just bolt it to the.
Well, this is an existing home. I'm not sure how that would all work.
Well, that's not hard to do.
No?
Houses are just, we all made them out of Legos. They're not much different now. You know?
All right.
You can add, I mean, seriously, you can,
Well, I guess the
you can
point,
hang real weight off.
Right.
Off today's, you know, architectural lumber.
But there's
Right,
nothing
so I-
down in
so I guess-
Pinehurst that's today's wood.
I guess today is that, well, this house is a newer house, actually. This is one that was built probably within 10 or 15 years. But the point is, he wants to build this deck. He's not looking at other types of options. So the point is do we just have him file an RDA?
Yep.
Then
Yeah.
that was really the question. Okay, that's all I needed to
You
know.
might suggest to him the whole fact of, you know, using the house to hold it, just so that if he likes that idea, we won't be wasting time again and again.
Past the school,
Well-
that road that cuts in.
Okay, there is one more thing on the agenda. I have
Down the road and park.
an invoice for $240 for 8 signs
Years ago.
at, I gather this is at,
This is for the Westgate site. This is actually part of a grant that we received, and so we will get reimbursed for this money.
But we have to
but
pay
we
it
have to
first?
spend it first and then get
so
reimbursed for
the
it.
invoice is from Village Signs for $240.
I move that we accept it.
Someone, I need approval to sign this invoice.
Motion to-
I have a
motion to
motion
pay.
to approve. I heard a second. All in favor? Aye, opposed? Okay. Okay.
I have a question, quick question. What is
Yes.
this guy who wants to give us his land? That's sort of
Yeah, I saw
bizarre.
that.
I thought,
Well, this happens
You don't want
a
to pay
lot
taxes
where
on it.
people have these
Exactly right.
tiny lots that they can't really do anything with, and
They
they
don't
don't
wanna
want to
pay
pay taxes,
taxes.
so they want to donate it to the town.
no.
In some cases, it makes sense, in others, it doesn't. So this one, I'd have to go look at. I haven't been there to see what it is. If it's like a little spot, everybody's dumping their leaves, then no, we don't want it, you know?
Yeah, it's a little,
But if it's something that has some
Okay,
value, then
Take
maybe.
take a
Yeah,
look and let us
We have
know.
one on Mattapoisett, like on the right. There's someone started a house and then realized the town said, you can't build a house here, and they just abandoned it.
this guy bought it, you can be
It's
sure it'll be
useless. It's
his.
in a velocity zone.
That's
Is
right.
that little square right there?
Yeah,
No, I don't want
I
it.
don't need it.
okay. I'll officially look at it, just to see what it looks like, and then go
Sure
from
you
there.
can find someone who'll do something creative with it.
And I officially won't change my mind.
A little dog walking park.
We only closed 3 things.
Yeah, so when you go down the road, you go all the way to the end.
I told him.
All right, can somebody do the
Motion
magic
to
words?
adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor? Aye, opposed, abstained. Thank you, Mr. White.